She stood up from the third row before anyone told her to. Jimmy Fallon had not called on her. The cameras were pointed elsewhere. She simply rose, a woman in her 70s in a dark blue dress, both hands pressed flat against her chest, holding something, and the people around her went still first, and then the rows behind them, and then the entire studio, until 300 people were watching a woman stand in the middle of a television audience, holding a letter she had been holding for 22 years. Jimmy Fallon turned from his desk. He saw her. And for a long moment, he could not speak at all. It was a Tuesday evening. November 2023. The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. Tom Hanks was the guest, there to promote a new film, and the interview had been warm and easy, full of the particular comfort that Tom Hanks brings into any room he enters. The audience had been laughing. The band had been loose. Jimmy Fallon had been leaning forward the way he does when a conversation is going somewhere real. Everything was flowing. Everything was right. Tom Hanks had just finished a small, funny story about his first apartment in New York, about a neighbor who left casseroles outside his door because she was convinced he wasn't eating. The audience had laughed. Jimmy Fallon had said, "That is the most Tom Hanks thing I have ever heard." And then, in the quiet that followed, from the third row, a woman stood up. Not loud, not dramatic, just standing. Her hands pressed flat to her chest around something folded and worn at the edges. Something held the way people hold the things they do not put down. Tom Hanks saw her at the same moment Jimmy Fallon did. His smile changed into something quieter and older, and he sat very still. Jimmy Fallon said, "Ma'am." He said, "Can I help you?" She said, "I'm sorry." She said it the way people say it when they mean the opposite, not "I'm sorry for interrupting," but "I'm sorry, this is the only way I knew how." She said, "I've been trying to give this back for 22 years. She held up what she was holding. A letter. Single page. The fold lines deep and soft from the number of times it had been opened and closed. She said, "It's from my son." She said, "He wrote it to Mr. Hanks." She said, "He never got to send it." The entire studio froze. To understand what happened next, you need to understand what happened in 1998. Tom Hanks wasn't always Tom Hanks, the legend. He had been famous for 15 years by then. Big Philadelphia, Forrest Gump had already happened. But 1998 was the year Saving Private Ryan came out, and that film put him in front of a different kind of audience. Not just people who loved movies. Veterans who had not spoken about the war in 50 years. Families of soldiers. People who had lost someone and had been handed, in the darkness of a cinema, something that looked like the truth of what they had lost. Tom Hanks received letters that year that he has never discussed publicly. He has said only that he read every one of them. He has said that some of them changed him. His name was Corporal Daniel Reyes. He was 23 years old. He was stationed at Camp Pendleton in the fall of 1998, 6 weeks from the end of his first deployment, when his unit went to see Saving Private Ryan at a theater just off base on a Thursday evening. He was a quiet young man from Stockton, California, the kind of quiet that reads as confidence in people who are paying attention. He had wanted to be a Marine since he was 11, since a Saturday morning when his grandfather, a Korean War veteran who had never once mentioned the war, sat beside him on the back porch and said only, "There are things worth protecting." That was all Daniel had understood anyway. He had dark eyes and his mother's hands, wide palms, careful fingers, and a habit of writing things down that had not stopped since high school. He kept a journal he mailed home in installments to his mother, Elena Reyes, 58 years old, who had raised him alone in a house on the east side of Stockton after his father left when Daniel was 4. She had worked 2 jobs for 11 years to keep the house. She had driven him to the recruiter's office on the day he enlisted, because he asked her to, and she had sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes afterward before she could drive. After the screening, Daniel went back to his barracks and wrote a letter to Tom Hanks in care of the film's production company. One sitting. Regulation notebook paper. Small, careful handwriting. He wrote about what the film had made him understand, not about war, about which he had formed his own ideas, but about the specific weight of being the one who came home. He wrote about his grandfather, about the back porch sentence. He wrote, "I don't know if Captain Miller is what a soldier is supposed to be or what he was forced to become. I think about that question because I'm going to find out the answer for myself soon enough." He wrote, "Thank you for making something that told the truth about what it costs." He stamped the envelope. He addressed it. He put it on his desk to mail in the morning. The next morning, his unit received an early deployment call. He shipped out before the mail ran. He was killed in action 14 months later, in November 1999. He was 24 years old. Elena Reyes found the letter on his desk when she packed up his room. Still sealed, still stamped, still addressed. She sat with it a long time. She did not open it. He had written it for someone else. She was not going to take that from him. She kept it in a small wooden box her son had made her when he was 12, on the top shelf of her closet. She thought about mailing it many times over the years. She wrote 2 letters to the production company and tore both of them up. She could not find the right words for what she was trying to do, only that her son had made something, had meant to give it, and the world was less complete for that, and she was the only person left who could fix it. For 22 years, she kept it in the wooden box. Her granddaughter, Daniel's niece, 20 years old, studying communications at Sacramento State, had gotten them the tickets to The Tonight Show on a New York school trip. She had not told her grandmother who the guest would be until they were in the cab to 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Elena Reyes had been quiet for the rest of the ride. When they arrived, she took the wooden box from her purse, removed the letter, and held it the same way she had held it the first night she found it. She did not tell her granddaughter what she was going to do. She was not sure herself. Behind the scenes, Tom Hanks had made a decision that defied every producer's expectation. His publicist had told him backstage, 30 minutes before taping, that a woman in the audience was the mother of a fallen Marine who had written him a letter in 1998. Tom Hanks had gone very quiet. He asked 3 questions. What was the Marine's name? Was the letter with her? Had anyone read it? The answers were Corporal Daniel Reyes, yes, and no. He said, "I don't want it explained to me before she gives it to me. I don't want to prepare a response." He said, "Whatever happens out there should be real." His publicist had written nothing on the teleprompter. She stood at the monitor with her hands folded and watched. Elena Reyes had not been told to stand. No producer had given her a signal. She had simply reached the moment, somewhere in the warmth and laughter of the casserole story, when she understood that if she did not stand now, she would leave the building still holding what Daniel had meant to give away. She was 73 years old. She was done carrying things that belonged to someone else. But this is the moment no one in the studio and no one watching at home ever saw coming. Tom Hanks rose from the guest chair and crossed the studio floor to the 3rd row of the audience. He stood in front of Elena Reyes. She looked up at him, and her chin was trembling, and she held out the letter with both hands. He took it. With both hands, he looked at his own name in a young man's handwriting on an envelope that had been waiting 22 years to arrive. His jaw moved once. He said, Tell me his name. His voice barely above a whisper, caught perfectly by the microphone at his lapel. She said, Daniel. Corporal Daniel Reyes. He was 23 when he wrote it. He saw your film, and he wanted you to know what it meant to him. He didn't get to send it. Tom Hanks looked at the envelope. Then he said, How long have you been carrying this? She said, 22 years. Steady, the steadiness of someone who has been preparing for this moment for a very long time, without knowing when it would come. He said, Did you read it? She shook her head. He said, You kept it all this time and you never read it? She said, It wasn't mine to read. He said, May I? She nodded. He opened the envelope carefully, unfolded the single page. He read it standing in the third row of The Tonight Show, in front of 300 people who were not breathing, with Alina Reyes watching his face to see what her son had said. He finished. He folded the letter once and held it against his chest with both hands. He stood that way for a moment no one counted. Then he said, his voice breaking on the last word, he understood. He said, he understood exactly what I was trying to do. He said, I've been hoping someone understood that for 25 years. Jimmy Fallon had both hands pressed over his mouth. Tears were streaming down his face, and he was not trying to stop them. He was not trying to do anything except stay present for what was happening in front of him. Tom Hanks said, Your son was a writer. She put a hand over her mouth. He said, This is the letter I needed to read. He said, I'm sorry it took 22 years to arrive. He said, I'm grateful it got here. She said, he would have been so glad. Her voice broke finally, cleanly and without apology. He would have been so glad. Tom Hanks put his arms around Alina Reyes in the third row of The Tonight Show, and she let him, and 300 strangers rose to their feet in complete silence before the applause came, because some moments require standing before they require sound. Questlove's sticks rested still in his palms. Every camera was on them. The director in the control room had not cut away, and was not going to. Jimmy Fallon stood at his desk with his hands pressed flat against his heart. Folks, he said finally, his voice barely there. He said, I don't have anything. He said, some nights the show just gets out of the way. The ovation lasted until Tom Hanks and Alina Reyes were seated, side by side, in the third row. Alina Reyes and Tom Hanks spoke for 40 minutes after the taping, alone in a green room with the door closed. Her granddaughter waited in the hallway. She said she could hear, through the door, the specific sound of two people telling each other the truth. Tom Hanks carries Daniel Reyes's letter now. The envelope lives in the inside pocket of whatever jacket he is wearing on any given day. He has not quoted from it. He has said only, it says the thing I was trying to say. From the other side, he has said, I think about him when I work. Alina Reyes returned to Stockton. She put the wooden box back on the top shelf of her closet, empty now, the way a thing should be when it has done what it was made to do. Daniel Reyes is buried at San Joaquin Valley National Cemetery in Gustine, California, in a row with 11 other men who came home the same way he did. On the days when the valley wind comes through, the grass moves the way it always has over that ground, quietly, without explanation, the way things move when they have already said everything they needed to say. Some letters take 22 years to arrive. They still get there on time.